Welcome to the Panic Room, where we talk about all things panic-inducing. I am the Queen of Panic. Warning, some episodes may contain content that may be disturbing to others. Viewer discretion is advised. Now let the games begin.
So, when I was a kid, maybe 6 or 7, this was the mid-1990s, we took a family trip to the beach in Florida. We were staying in a beach house, a short walking distance from the beach. We went to the beach and I was supposed to stay in sight of my mom, but I wandered way down and before I knew it, I was lost. A lot of the houses looked the same and I wasn't sure which one was ours. Plus, I couldn't see my mom anywhere. It started to rain. I came to a path that I was pretty sure led back to our house. Only it didn't lead to a house at all, but instead to a parking lot. There was a big dirty van parked there. It was the only vehicle around. I was about to turn back when I noticed an overweight woman with brown hair, a hot pink tank top, and those big, clunky, thick glasses that were popular in the 80s, waving and smiling at me from the passenger seat of the van. She said something like,
"Oh my, it's raining. Where's your mommy? Let me take you to her. It's dangerous out here in the rain. You could get struck by lightning."
She was very friendly, almost overly so. In the driver's seat was a very overweight man without a shirt on, a hairy gray chest and some clunky-looking gold chain. He was wearing yellow-tinted Elvis shades and staring at me intently. He was also smoking a cigarette, which I knew was bad. The woman stepped out of the van and kneeled down to me. She asked how old I was. When I told her, she gleefully remarked,
"Oh my, we have 2 boys your age at our house. You should come over and spend the night. We've got movies, Nintendo, and in the morning we've got all types of cereal."
I had been taught all about stranger danger, but at this point in my life, no adult had ever given me any reason not to trust them. The lady continued talking about stuff like how the boys have go-karts and they like to drink chocolate milk. She made it seem very enticing for a 7-year-old kid, and at this point I trusted her. I mostly liked the idea of getting to play with some kids my age. Then I remembered that I needed to ask my mom first. I told her this. She told me that was no problem, that they just live up the road. My mom shouldn't mind. It started raining harder and she opened the sliding door of the van and said something like,
"Let's get you out of this rain and go find your mommy."
I knew logically that I shouldn't do this, but the lady seemed really nice, and I was desperately wanting to get out of the rain. As I walked toward the open door of the van, I noticed an awful stench that almost made me gag. This set off alarm bells in my head that something wasn't right. There were cigarette butts all over the floor. I looked up at the fat man who was not only staring at me with this menacing glare, but he had this real creepy, toothy smile and his teeth were stained a dark yellow. I could pick up on a very fucked up vibe from him. I knew now that I should run, but the woman was ushering me to hurry up and get in. Her demeanor had changed. She was being demanding and trying to literally push me into the van. She sounded angry and said,
"Get in already."
in a tone that was complete opposite of how she had sounded before. I jumped to the side and started running as fast as I could. The woman managed to grab my arm or wrist, but somehow I was able to quickly break free and run back to the beach. I think she tried to chase me, but like I said, she was very overweight. I made it back to my mom, who was freaking out. I tried explaining what had happened to me, but I don't think that at 7 years old, I was able to convey the gravity of what had happened to me, and I didn't fully understand it myself.
"Hello, I wish to tell you where my fear of going in water comes from. It's something I was never ashamed of, but I never told the real details to anyone. To begin with, I never had a fear of water when I was young. I was a good swimmer, with a lot of imagination, who loved The Little Mermaid, Disney and Anderson versions. But after meeting someone when I was 13 years old, it changed everything. Now, a little introduction to my childhood to understand the context. My mom couldn't have had a baby because she had an illness, so she and her husband adopted me when I was a baby. I never had difficulties regarding that, and had a happy childhood being an only child. They are my mother and father, that's all. However, one day they divorced. My dad had an affair with a younger woman. She got pregnant, and he told my mom when the pregnancy was almost done. I was 9, and it broke the relationship I had with my dad and gave me insecurities about being unloved by him. My parents stayed friends only for me, and for many years, I spent half of the summer holidays with one and the other half with the other. This summer, I was with my dad and his new wife and my half-little brother, and I hated it. Being a teenager who despised this new side of my family and being forced to go with them to a beach, I was always grumpy and dramatic. It was a small nudist beach, a new thing my father discovered while having a new partner, but I didn't really care since I could wear a swimsuit. One day, my dad came back to us with a guy around 50 who introduced himself as an English teacher. Let's call him Alex. Usually, I had nice grades, but I wasn't very good in English, which wasn't my first language, so my dad told me Alex agreed to teach me a bit and help me do my summer homework. I was happy, seeing there an opportunity to not have my father helping me do them. So, the next day, Alex came back to us and helped me do a few exercises while my dad went away to go swimming. After an hour or so, Alex proposed to go in the water, and I accepted. I said to my father's new wife where I was going and followed Alex. He gave me a tuba and a mask to watch the fishes. Now, I know it was stupid. I was well aware of stranger danger, but I was happy to have a distraction and didn't think this guy was dangerous because I got introduced by my dad. There weren't a lot of waves, and the sea was so clear. I remember watching in fascination all the colorful fishes around me. I followed Alex without difficulty, and we turned around some big rocks. There, he gave me the sign to go up and told me we could rest here. Like I said at the beginning, I was a good swimmer, so I put the tuba away from my mouth and said that I wasn't tired at all. I don't know if he didn't hear me or didn't care, because the next moment, I felt hands around my hips, forcing me onto his naked lap. I panicked. My head got under the water while the guy was pinning my back against his front. I don't remember if I had the tuba back on to my mouth, but my feet couldn't touch the sand at the bottom, and I couldn't get to the surface. I thought I was about to drown. I was so scared. I don't even know if he was hard or trying to touch me. I kicked and struggled until he let go of me. I climbed on the rocks and got onto shore before going back to the beach on foot. The rest of the day, I was silent, but nobody seemed to notice. Except during the evening when my mom called me to the phone, and she immediately knew something was wrong. I briefly explained to her what happened, and she told everything to my father, who confronted Alex the next day. We never contacted the police, and I never met him again. Maybe he wasn't an English teacher to begin with, and was looking for an excuse to meet a naive teenager. The moment Alex grabbed me was so quick, maybe 20 seconds, but it left a huge scar on me. I can't go totally underwater while being unable to touch the bottom without panicking. I don't swim anymore. I can't look at pictures taken underwater, and I'm wary of men. Not just because of that, but it didn't help. I know it could have ended way worse, and that's the only thing I'm glad for. Thanks for reading. As I said before, some of my friends know about this story, but I never told them the details. Even my family doesn't. really know. This happened in a beach in the Philippines about 2 years ago. Me and my friends decided to take a quick vacation to let off some steam from work. On our first night, we decided to drink just outside of our hotel room. We got a little tipsy, and one of my friends decided to take a walk on the beach and try to meet some other tourists there. I had a bad feeling about what might happen to him since he is already drunk, so I decided to join him together with another friend. He said he wanted to visit the Rock Formations, which is a known gay hookup spot since the place was dark and there was no other establishment on that part of the shoreline. It stretches to about half the length of a football court with pure darkness. I was reluctant about the idea of him going in there, but he was adamant. So I agreed as long as he comes back after a few minutes. Me and my other friend waited on the last bar on the end of the shoreline before the dark area starts. Me and my friend were talking about something when we heard a gut-wrenching scream. It sounded like our friend, so we decided to rush in. The only light at the time is coming from the moon, so my friend decided to pull out his phone and turn on the flashlight. We asked around and saw some people hooking up on the sand. We asked if they saw our friend giving them descriptions on what he might look like, but they said they never saw him. Our hearts were pounding at this point, because we don't know what might have happened to him. We ran until we reached the end of it. There was a huge rock on the shore about 15 foot tall, with a local guy standing on top of it. We asked him, "Have you seen our friend? He was about my height, wearing a black shirt." He said,
Was he gay?
"I don't see the relevance of the question, but I said yes."
He might have went there in the mangroves.
And then pointed to the darker part of the beach filled with the mangroves. Using only the light on our phones, we tried to search the small area. It looks like a tiny shelter with the overgrown plants acting as a roof. When we turned back, the guy on top of the rock is already walking towards us. Then, 2 more guys popped up behind him, probably hiding behind the huge rock. "He wasn't there," I said. Then the guy who was on the rock did a karate chop on my friend's arm for him to let go of his phone, which was successful as the phone rolled to the sand. My friend was able to grab the phone, and that's when he shouted, "Run." I was confused with what just happened, that I just started running after he said run without actually knowing what we were running for. That's when it hit me that it was an ambush, that we were led into the mangroves for them to steal my friend's phone. I was running for a few seconds when I started to feel the weight on my feet. The sandals I was wearing got really heavy because I wasn't aware I've been running on wet sand. My friend took off his flip-flops for him to run faster. Wanted to do the same, but then I realized my sandals were strap-on, so I just continued running. I can hear the guys chasing us say,
Stop! We were just joking!
I don't want to fall for what they say, so I just continued running. My legs are starting to feel numb since I'm not really an athletic person. There came a point where I wanted to just stop, since I don't have anything valuable on me. But then, I thought that it could be reason for them to harm me, so I ran with all my might till we reached the first bar. My friend was already there catching his breath when he saw the friend we were looking for, laughing and talking to locals. We wanted to punch him for what he put us through, but he had no idea what just happened to us, so we let it go. Our vacation still went through, and we still go to that island from time to time, but we vowed to never go in that side of the beach ever again. Now, that part of the beach has been closed to tourists. So to those guys who tried to mug us on the beach, please, let's not meet.
This is my first post on this sub, but I frequented it for a while. This is really the only experience I've had that would fit on this sub, and it felt so surreal while it was happening. So, I'm a 21-year-old male, and this experience happened last summer while I was on vacation at Myrtle Beach with my family. We were staying in a resort right on the beach, and we're on the 13th or 14th floor in a sort of timeshare. One night I was feeling restless and having a hard time falling asleep, and at around 3 a.m. I decided to go out onto the balcony to get some air. I stepped out and was stunned as there was a full moon, and the moonlight on the water was really beautiful. The beach was completely empty as far as I could see, and I had never seen it like that before. I decided since I wasn't able to sleep, I might as well head down, take a stroll, and listen to some music to relax. Hopefully, when I returned, I'd be able to get some sleep. It was really unsafe and dumb of me, but since it was 3 a.m. and the rest of my family was asleep, I decided to just head down without letting anyone know where I was going, as I thought I'd just go and chill there for about 10 to 15 minutes, then come right back up. So, at the base of the timeshare we were at, there was an area with a pool, an outdoor bar, and then 2 boardwalks separated by about 100 feet, which both led to the beach. On the sides of the boardwalks, there were swaths of tall grass separating the ocean and the resort. When I got down to the base, the entire area was completely deserted, and I started walking down the boardwalk on the right side towards the beach. As I'm walking down, I suddenly see someone approaching me from the beach, which was strange because I had a pretty clear view of the same area from the balcony just before, and had literally seen no one. I start to get a bit nervous as I see this figure approach, and as I get closer, I see it is a man, maybe in his late 30s, who has a backpack on and is wearing glasses with large, square lenses. As he gets closer, I get a clearer look at him as the boardwalk is sort of illuminated by lights from the outdoor bar. He looks very on edge and alert, almost like he is trying to find someone who is trying to meet him in this area, and his clothes were somewhat tattered. We made eye contact and I sort of nodded him and passed. At this point, I'm creeped out, because honest to God, he had a sort of Jeffrey Dahmer look. Maybe it was the glasses. And he just didn't seem like he actually belonged to the timeshare. I shake it off and keep walking down to the beach and put my headphones in. As I get down to the beach, I turn right and start walking parallel to the water, and I'm just taking in the scenery. I'm barefoot and decide it'd be nice to walk just along the shoreline, so I move closer to the water and continue walking. I'm walking for no longer than a minute before I get a really strange feeling that something is wrong. I take off my headphones and turn around, and I see a dark figure that is trailing me just up shore. He is situated in between me and the timeshare. I immediately can tell from the figure's height, body type, and demeanor that it is the same man I passed on the boardwalk. At this point, I'm starting to panic, as every story from Let's Not Meet is rushing to my head. At the same time, I'm trying to rationalize as it feels too surreal that I may actually be in a dangerous situation. So I remind myself it could just be a coincidence, and the man decided he also wanted to take a walk on the beach and just happened to be headed in the same direction as me. So, I take some breaths and turn my head back to the ocean and continue walking in the same direction. After a couple seconds, I turn my head back again and see that now he is much closer to me and is not walking parallel to me, but is definitely actually walking towards me. I pick up my walking speed now and turn my head back around and see he is matching my faster pace and is still walking towards me and the water. Still, for some reason, I think, okay, maybe he also wants to walk by the water. There's no way I'm actually being followed by a creepy man on a deserted beach. So at this point, to truly test it, I do a 180 and completely change directions. And as I turn my head, I see him completely change directions with me and continue closing in distance, and he is power walking now. It suddenly hits me that I'm in a really bad situation, and I take off in a run along the water. And he starts running as well, but stays up shore of me so that if I try to run towards the boardwalk, he will intercept me. I'm freaking out now and just keep running with no plan, but figure that since I'm 20 and sort of fit, I should probably be able to keep running along the water and outrun him, and then find some other exit off the beach and either call my family or head back to the timeshare on the road. So I keep running, but he's keeping up with me. And this goes on for what feels like 10 to 15 minutes. The scariest part of all this, which I wouldn't have thought of, is it is completely dead silent. All I hear is my breath and feet on the sand, and when I turn, I only see his shadowy figure up shore keeping pace with me. Suddenly, up ahead in the sand, I see a small blue light and what looks like 4 people on the beach with a blanket. They are a bit up shore. I turn and look at the figure and bet even though they are up shore, I can beat him to these people. So I start sprinting towards them with hopes of quickly telling them what is going on so we can all confront him. I really use up my energy sprinting towards them, and as I approach, my heart drops. What I see is 4 guys on a blanket with 3 or 4 handles of hard liquor surrounding them. 3 of the handles are empty, and the 4th is about half empty. 3 of the guys are just completely passed out on the blankets, and the last is half set up, obviously beyond shit-faced, with this sort of party hat on that has blue lights on it, and he is talking to himself. His eyes are half closed, and he doesn't even register me approaching him, even though now I'm no more than 5 feet away. I turn and see the figure has slowed down and is observing me, and then I see he makes sense of the group's state and suddenly starts sprinting at me. As he gets closer, the half-passed-out guy's blue light illuminates him, and I can clearly see it's the same guy as before. I make eye contact with him, and I can see he's wide-eyed and looks almost manic, and is barreling at me full sprint. At this point, I decide I have to do something decisive. It seemed like I had underestimated his fitness, and since I had just sprinted towards this group and exhausted myself, I was afraid that he might actually be able to catch up to me if we just continued running along the beach indefinitely, and then who knows what. So, instead of turning around and running, I suddenly sprint towards him and to the right, which I don't think he was expecting at all. I catch him off balance and run past him, and I literally am full sprinting back to the timeshare, without even looking back. Literally all the hairs on my neck were standing, and it felt like a dream where you're barely evading someone, but he's right about to catch you. The adrenaline was crazy, and I keep running and start to see the timeshare. I finally turn around to see how close he is, and I see him in the distance, maybe 400 to 500 feet away. He's lost a lot of distance on me. I don't waste any time and sprint up the boardwalk and towards the base of the timeshare. I jam the elevator buttons and leap in, and start mashing the closed door button as I'm gasping for air. The door closes and I hit the button for my floor, and when the elevator reaches, I literally sprint back to my room, open the door, enter, and then slam the door and double lock it. I'm breathing heavy, and I drop to the floor and just sit there for a minute, not believing what just happened. I crouch and crawl over to my room, as I was literally afraid he might be able to see me through the window on our balcony, and I enter my room. Let's just say I definitely wasn't able to sleep after that. Guy who chased me on the beach, let's not meet again.
First-time poster, long-time lurker here. This memory was brought up a Sunday lunch last Sunday, so I decided to post it here. Okay, so a bit of backstory here. I'm 19 now, and I was about 4 or 5 at the time. My parents used to be nudists when I was small, and would encourage me and my brother, 7 or 8, to accept our bodies, not to be afraid to show the skin that we were born in, other child teaching stuff like that. They informed me that a lot of their reason for being nudists was because of a very manipulative and persuasive friend they used to have who was into the practice. They are now extremely embarrassed about their period as nudists and tried to hide the matter from a lot of friends and family. Well, anyway, my dad and mom both worked a pretty stable job in an online accounting firm back then, so we went on holidays quite often. I used to love going to Spain the most, so we chose to go to Spain that summer. On our 10-day trip there, before we headed off to the US for the weekend, we enjoyed going to the beach almost every day. Of course, at the time, my parents loved nudist beaches, not only for people like them, but also to get a perfect lineless tan. So, we were on the beach, and my dad and brother were splashing around on the shore, while my mother and I were on sun chairs, her sleeping, and me burying my legs in some sand. I didn't really have anything growing on me back then, so nobody paid attention to me. They did like to look at my mother occasionally, though. And when I told her we moved our chairs back to a more secluded part of the beach, where there were less people, she fell back asleep, and next to us were a couple, with 2 kids playing behind their chairs, which I thought were their kids. The woman looked at me as I reburied my little legs in the sand and pointed at me, whispering something to the man. She stood up and hung a towel from the sun umbrella above them. She reached into a duffel bag next to them and got out some sunscreen and started to rub it on a sausage-like thing between his legs, vigorously. I now know that that was his privates. He was staring intently at me, and even 14 years later I remember that odd look of determination but pleasure on his face. He passed the sunscreen to his wife/girlfriend, and she slipped some in between her legs as well. Even at that age, and with my parents being nudists, I felt an instinct that it was not right for them to be staring at me and touching themselves like that. I tried to ignore them and look away, but when I looked back, they were still staring at me. The woman's look was a little softer than the man's, but still really thoroughly creeped me out. What happened next is one of the creepiest things that has ever happened to me, and that is saying a lot, compared to other things that have happened to me. The next minute, the woman stopped touching herself and got up. She wiped her hands and area and reached for me, grabbing my arms and shushing me, trying to pull me out of the sand I was buried in. The sand was giving away quickly, and I screamed for my mother. She says I kept going, "Mommy, help! Mommy, help!" I don't remember. It was all a blur to me as my mom got up and yelled, "¿Qué estás haciendo?" "What are you doing?" at the woman. My mom said the woman quickly let go of me and, not in Spanish, but in Northern English accent, she must have guessed because the English tinge in my mother's Spanish, explained to her that I buried myself deep in the sand, up to my nose, and she thought I was going to slip under. So she had simply pulled me out of concern. The sand underneath me was wet, and from my hips upward. I had not a spot of sand stuck to me whatsoever, so my mom knew she was lying.
Dog. Your daughter's very pretty. We meant no harm.
The man said, unaware he was still rubbing his nether regions. At that point, my mother loses it. "What the fuck did you just say? And what are you doing to yourself, you disgusting twit?" The man realized and removed his hand from his inner thigh.
Just sun cream. Keep the old sun from burning me. Just rubbing it in. Do you like hip-hop? Is what I said.
My mother reminded him his wife had draped a towel that was blocking all the sun, and he blushed profusely. She spat in the woman's face and got my hand and dragged me away quickly. We got to my brother and my dad, and she told my dad what had happened. He stormed over to the lifeguard and explained to him very shortly the situation. Then him and the lifeguard went to where our stuff was. The couple had taken off, and all that was left were their seats and the 2 kids. Mum scoured through our beach bag for her cell to call the local police station, but her phone was missing. So was my dad's wallet. The lifeguard radioed into the beach kiosk to call the police, and to play on the speakers placed on the bars around that 2 kids were unaccompanied and their parents need to collect them. In a minute or so, a woman came running, tears in her eyes, and scooped up the 2 kids. They must have been around 2 years old, and she held them crying her eyes out. She thanked the lifeguard, and my parents had told us that her husband had fallen asleep. And we told her the couple must have taken them and moved them to their spot. She had her cell in hand, and she said she was just about to call the police. My mom told her to, and the lifeguard offered to drive us all to the station, including the woman and her husband, as his shift was about to end. We all changed and drove down. In the end, my parents and the nice couple that gave their statements. 2 days later, that couple was caught in a hotel, offering kids around the pool sprites that had been apparently drugged. They admitted to being child fetishists, a more complicated word for nasty pedophiles, and were arrested for many charges like child abduction. They were found with a kid in their hotel room, attempted kidnap, child molestation, trespassing, amongst others. My dad says they were deported back to somewhere near Bradford, but ran away before court was due. I don't know if they're still out there, but creepy, vile couple who hurts kids and upset my childhood, let's never, ever meet again. Every year for summer holidays, me and my family go to my grandparents' house in a region in France, and they have the luck to live off a cliff right next to the beach, which is pretty neat. And for you to understand the situation I was in, I'll do a quick description of the place, and most importantly, how to access the beach. If it's not clear enough, I'll try to get some pictures as soon as possible, as I'm here again. When we get out of the house, we need to cross a little road and get to an entrance between bushes. Then, it's a clear but narrow path that you can take just to enjoy the view of the sea, or you can also go to a staircase built in the rock of the cliff. Then, you'll just have to walk on a medium-sized stone, and ta-da, you've arrived to the beach. The place itself is pretty big, but there's only a few ways to access it. By the stairs I described, or by another one at the end of it. Also, big thing to mention, as I grew older, I stopped building sandcastles and swimming with my family. I'm 18, and the other of my 3 siblings are way younger than me, so I was done playing child's games. And I had started to climb the cliffs for fun. Not the steep ones. It was more so a semi-hiking of particularly collapsing cliffs. This will be relevant later. Now, on to the story. Last year, after having dinner, I headed out for a little walk on the beach. No one seemed determined to come with me, so I went alone. No big deal. I did it every evening. After going down the staircase, I walked a little bit and then sat down on a stone to smoke a joint and listen to some music. Not really smart, but hey, I'm a teen in a little village that I go to every summer, and as much as I love my family, it gets pretty boring from time to time. Anyways, I'm enjoying my time when I spot a guy in the corner of my eye. Maybe 40 meters from me. No big deal. It's a free access beach after all. But then, he starts heading his way towards me. His head was shaved, and he had a square-shaped glasses on. Maybe around his mid-20s or early 30s. He was pretty tan, like he worked outside for a long time. The bald dude is getting closer, but again, I don't own the beach. As he's coming next to me, I hear over my music that he's trying to talk to me. I remove my headphones, and he said something along the lines of,
"Hey, you look familiar. Have we met before?"
I answered with a calm but firm no, but he keeps insisting that he saw me at the beach today. And sure, I said, maybe he did, but there are tons of people at the beach. I don't remember everyone I see. The way I'm responding clearly implies that I'm not interested in having this conversation with him, but he sits on a stone next to me, and he keeps talking, mostly about himself, that he loves the beach, the weather is nice, that I'm nice with him. That's where it got creepy. He says that it's rare to find nice girls, and that he's happy I'm not a bitch. He then asks about my name, where I live, and of course, I didn't say a thing. He started to lean closer to me, which made me really uncomfortable, always with a huge grin on his face. That's when it hit me. Remember when I said that there were only a few entrances to the beach? That asshole was sitting right between me and the staircase. I was cornered. No one was there. We were completely alone, and even though I'm quite athletic, I'm 4'9", and weigh 90 pounds. This guy for me is twice my size, and he clearly wants to continue our discussion. As I'm not responding, he started to sound annoyed, clenching his fists, but still with this stupid grin glued to his face. He asked me if I really was a good girl, and why won't I talk to him? I'm shitting myself at this point, when I look at my left and almost let out a sigh of relief. One of the cliffs I'm used to climbing onto is right next to us, and even if I said that they are more like hiking than climbing, I could rush to the top in a matter of seconds, as I'm used to doing it. Run on the narrow path and go home safe. So I just got up and said, "I don't want to talk anymore. Good evening." He looked startled for a moment, looking back at the staircase for a second, which confirmed my suspicions. He thought he had blocked my only way of escaping, since the other stairs were way too far. To this day, it still scares me that this was his first reaction. At this point, I'm high, tired, and terrified, but I start to walk confidently to the cliff, at a high pace, and in the corner of my eye I can see that he is standing now, looking in my direction. As soon as I'm close enough, I literally start to jump for the rock to rock as fast as I can, scratching myself in the process. When I arrive at the top, I look down and he's looking at me, not smiling like before, but frowning and looking like he is on the verge of committing a crime. I then sprinted to my grandparents' house, which luckily is damn fucking close, and explained everything to my mother, and the next day I reported the guy to the police station, giving the best description that I could. Since it's a small village, they could apprehend him easily if he was a resident, but to be fair, French police sucks, and nothing came of it. So yeah, sorry if it was long, but I wanted to give a detailed explanation of what happened. It was a bit anticlimactic, but this guy actually had a plan in mind, and I'm glad I did not stick around to discover what it was. And again, since I'm back at the place, I could take some pictures if you'd like, just ask. Anyway, creepy bald guy, don't come near me again. Hello, Let's Not Meet. I discovered this sub not too long ago, and it quickly turned into one of my favorites. This is something that happened to me about a year ago. This isn't exactly creepy, at least anywhere near as creepy as some of the other stories in the sub. Just weird. But I thought it would be a nice story to share. I live in Barcelona, Spain, a city where there is activity pretty much 24/7, all over the city. I was with my two friends, and we were walking along the beach at about 4 a.m. We had gone partying. Everything was dark except for the moonlight and the occasional lamppost. As we're walking along the shore, out of nowhere, this extremely tall, pale, skinny, almost to the point that he looked like a walking skeleton, bald, naked man jumps out from behind a pile of stacked beach beds. I don't know what they were called, those things that people lie on while they're chilling at the beach, and runs off towards the beach. He dives in head first and starts to swim. We just stand there for a couple of seconds thinking, what the fuck just happened? Anyways, we start walking again when we realize that we couldn't see the guy. So we walk up to the part of the beach where he had dived into the sea to see if we could spot him. While searching for any signs of life, we noticed his bald, pale head off in the distance. We stand there staring, trying to figure out if this man was still alive or had drowned and was just floating there. We noticed his head slowly getting closer and closer when all of a sudden the man jumps out at us. We turn around and start running towards the street at the opposite side of the beach, not daring to look back. We get to the street, standing under a lamppost next to a bus stop, where there were 2 other guys. We slowly start to walk back to the beach to see if we can see the guy, and off in the distance we see him, standing there. He waved at us and ran back towards the beach. This was one of many weird things that have happened to me in this wonderful city. This happened a few years ago, right before I deployed to the Middle East. I'm in the National Guard. So before we deployed, we had to train up in Fort Hood, Texas. After our training was finished, we got a 4-day pass. I was single, no kids. So I decided instead of going home, I would travel around Texas. After a few days in Austin, I wanted to see the Gulf. So I traveled to Rockport, Texas. I parked my rental about a 10-minute walk away from the beach since it was a nice day and I don't mind walking. It was pretty quiet as it was about 9 a.m., but there were still quite a few people there. I was laying out and reading my Kindle when a heavily tattooed young guy walks up to where I'm laying, and he asks if he can leave his clothes near me while he takes a dip. I say sure. He goes in the ocean, and I don't really think much of it. He comes out of the water about 10 minutes later and proceeds to lay down next to me and starts chatting. I kind of wanted to be left alone, but he seemed harmless, and I didn't want to be rude, so I talked to him for a little bit. His name is Angel, and he said he lived about 30 minutes away. He tells me he would have joined the military, but he spent time in prison. I don't ask for what. He tells me it was for some mix-up. This mix-up landed him 8 years. I try and direct the conversation to harmless things, but he doesn't act like a lonely stranger or even a guy trying to hit on a girl. He's completely uninterested in anything except why I'm here and who I'm with. Then he starts getting really creepy. He keeps repeating back to me that,
"You're really all alone. You came here by yourself. You're not with anyone."
Alarm bells are ringing. I didn't actually phrase any of it quite like that, but he read between the lines. Note to future self, always pretend to be waiting on friends. I start stressing that I'm leaving that day. I wasn't. And that I'm in the military and have to be back soon or they'll consider me AWOL and start looking for me. True, but not for another 2 days when my pass is up. He pretty much ignores all of this, and I notice that we're both watching people walk by us carefully, if that makes sense. Luckily for me, it was getting more crowded and families were walking by us in pretty steady intervals. He starts asking me what kind of car I drive, what hotel I'm staying in. He asks me where I'm parked. I tell him a rental, I'm leaving, and I don't remember where I'm parked. I've been creeped out for a while now, and I've been in some dangerous situations before, but I've never been more frightened than in broad daylight, surrounded by people, talking with this creep. He then starts telling me about this party in his town later tonight and that I should come. I could meet all of his friends. He offers to drive me. Again, I bring up that I'm leaving, I'm in the military, and all that jazz. He continues to be amazed that I'm here all by myself. He also tells me he's parked right behind us. Do I want to see his car? No, I do not. I tell him I'm comfortable where I'm at. He had also put on his cargo shorts he took off for his ocean dip and kept rubbing one of the pockets while he talked to me. There was definitely something in there. I doubt it was a gun, but this guy was scaring the hell out of me, and it made me wonder if he had a knife or something. Now, I know it seems strange that I didn't just up and leave, but this guy was making every hair on the back of my neck stand up, and I wanted to extract myself without pissing him off. Then, after mentioning the party again, he says something even creepier. He looks at my legs and says,
"I bet you could run for days."
What the fuck? There was zero context for this statement. We were not talking about working out, athletics, the Olympics, fitness routines, or even military training. None of those topics came up ever the whole time he was creeping me out. I look over, and a family is walking by us fairly close. So I leapt up and started gathering my stuff, telling him I gotta go to the restroom. See you later. I power walk down closer to the water and walk along the beach in the opposite direction of my car, towards the pier, where there was restrooms/snacks, etc. He followed me the entire way while talking on his cell phone. I was walking along the beach while he was walking along the edge of the parking lot that ran parallel. Once I reached the pier, I doubled back to where my car was actually parked. I watched him till he finally stopped following me. There was a small booth that parking lot attendant sat in. I parked in the free lot behind her, but I stopped and told her the situation, described the car I was getting into, which she could see from her booth. She agreed to make sure I got in my car safely, a little paranoid since I was fairly certain he had stopped following me, but just in case. I'm just glad the beach was fairly crowded. Beach creep. Let's not meet again.
This is a story that happened to me when I was a child. I thought I'd share it on here. I've never shared this with anyone really before, so here we go. This took place around 2008, if my memory serves me right. Me and my family had just moved to Costa Rica, and we enjoyed spending most of our time at the beach. One beach in particular, which was near a lovely little river I'd like to swim in. It was on the same beach that 9-year-old me found a dead body floating in the ocean. To give a little context, I had been playing on the beach, which we thought was relatively a safe beach, so my parents were farther up. How wrong we were about being safe. I remember seeing something floating in the water, but I wasn't sure what it was, so I went to investigate and found a dead man just floating there. Part of his leg had been hacked off. It was obvious he had not drowned. The man had clearly been murdered. Around this time, we had heard about a recent string of murders that had happened both on the Caribbean side of Costa Rica, where we were, and on the Pacific side. The murders had been happening every 6 months, rotating in between both regions of the country. So there was reason to assume this murder had been done by the same person since it seemed to fit the timeline. As far as I can remember, the details of the murder were never disclosed in any of the local newspapers, only that the man had been a tourist from England. So there was no way for anyone who had not seen the man on the beach to know the specifics of his murder. Eventually, the whole thing blew over and we returned to that same beach. I can't quite remember a time frame, but it was definitely within a few months of me finding the dead man that this next part happened. One day I was swimming in the river with my mother when a very strange man popped up out of the water, startling us. He had a spear gun in his hand and a snorkel mask on. Anyways, he began talking to my mom, and I think we could both tell that something was just off about this guy. I wasn't really paying attention for most of their conversation, but I do remember him bringing up the recent murder on the beach, and he seemed to know a great lot of details about it, which, as I previously mentioned, were not available to the public. It almost seemed as if he was trying to confess that he was the one who murdered the man, but without directly saying so. He also talked about how he traveled in between the Caribbean and the Pacific side of Costa Rica, spending half a year in each spot. Eventually, they also got on the topic of what he did for a living, and he went into a great detail about how he made the masks for the movie Eyes Wide Shut, and that he would make those masks, and I presume other ones based on real-life human emotions, and that he specifically liked capturing the look of fear. We were totally taken aback by this guy and didn't really know what to do. Eventually, he just got back into the river and swam away, and thankfully we never saw him again. I do not know if this is related or not, but the weird strain of murders suddenly stopped after that. Sorry for the long post. Also, I tried to find the article about the man who was murdered so I could link it, but couldn't seem to find info on it.
Creeps and weirdos. And since I got such a positive response on my last experience, I figured I would share a few more with you all. I'll be writing in order of Let's Not Meet-ness, so scroll to the end if you want the scariest. Background. These all took place outside my home at the time, which was on the literal last block of a major city, right across the street from the beach. The building was framed on 4 sides by the beach, the woods, a construction site, and a few other sleepy houses, as well as a Muni line. Think the subway but above ground. It's the very last stop on the Muni, so unless you catch it at the right time of day, or at the height of tourist season, the area is basically empty on all sidewalks. The house itself has an initial patio door, which doesn't always fully close if you don't slam it, and then an entry area, with a staircase, and leading up to the second locked door that leads to the apartment. Experience number 1. I get home from work one day about 9 p.m. and immediately get into the small spat with my roommates. After about 30 minutes, I decided to leave the house to cool off. I had planned on sitting on the porch outside, but as I looked across the street at the ocean, I decided it would be more peaceful there. I had never been to the beach at night, for safety, but as I looked at it in the well-lit parking lot, and no one in sight, I decided it would be all right. In the 1-block span from the beach to my home, there was a little wooded path that started on my street and dumped you out at a crosswalk for the beach. It also intersected with another pathway that took you down the coast. I sat for a bit. Everything was fine. And after a while, I started the 1-minute walk back on the little path. All of a sudden, I look up and see a man walking briskly on the intersecting path, looking right at me. I speed up a bit and try to ignore him, and as we hit the section where the 2 paths intersect, I end up being about a foot away from him. He calls,
"Hey, I want to talk to you."
I ignore him, and after a few more steps, he reaches out his hand and grabs part of my hair, saying,
"Hey, come here."
I immediately yank my hair out of his hand and book it the last block, sprinting to my house, and I can hear him running behind me. I turn the corner sharply, and I'm briefly out of his sight. Luckily, the initial entryway to the patio had been left open by accident, and I run through the door and slam it shut. I hear his footsteps stop outside, followed by silence. As I go upstairs and look through our front window, I see him walking away into the construction site. Experience number 2. I had a friend that lived a couple blocks from where I was, along the same stretch of beach. After hanging out one day, I decided to head back home around sunset. I've walked this route many times, and it's just barely light outside still. Only a 5-minute walk, so I figure I'll be home before dark. As I cross the intersection from their house, I notice a white van parked on the corner that is not usually there, covering a little garden I like to look at on my way back. I can just barely make out 2 people in the front seat. I think, odd. Okay, whatever, and pull my pepper spray. I cross the street passing the van, and now have my back to it. As soon as my foot hits the pavement on the other side of the street, I hear the van start up. I turn my head just slightly and see them, illegally, turning onto the street where I was now walking. They creep the van beside me slowly, just behind me but within my peripheral vision. I decided to stop and let them pass. I paused and pretended to be looking at my phone, and see them stop driving immediately. This was a nope from me, and I broke into a run, the van following me, to a small vintage motel about 1 building away, that I now know was open entrance courtyard. And so as I approach it, I turn quickly into the yard, and run up to an archway entry for a unit. I stop at the first few steps, catching my breath, and I open my phone front camera to use it as sort of a mirror to see what the van is doing. They had backed up to the entry of the motel, and sat there for a few minutes. Then, the one on the passenger side opened the door and started walking towards the motel, his phone flashlight on, and I immediately pulled my own phone back, listening for his footsteps and readying myself to start banging on the motel door, hoping someone is inside. I wait in the silence for a long time, long enough for it to get dark. I finally look out again, and both the man and van are gone. I call an Uber to take me the last 2 blocks. Sorry, Uber driver. Never saw them again. Experience 3. I have a friend over and we want to dab, form of smoking weed, and it's about 10 p.m. My roommates don't like dabbing in the house because of the smell, so he and I go to his car parked out front. We're in there having a good time when I notice a person walking down the block, pulling on car door handles. I notify him, and we watch as the same person comes up to his car and yanks on his back door. He honks his horn and they back up for a minute, then walk up to his driver window and knock on the window, making a motion to roll it down. Just as I'm about to tell him don't, he rolls down the window a bit. This person is clean and normal clothed, and asks what day it is and what time it is, to which my friend answers. They then stand there and stare at us as he tries to usher them away, even offering money. Without saying anything, they walk down the block, and once they reach the intersection between the construction site and the woods, they roll their head back up to the sky and just start screaming at the top of their lungs as they backed away out of sight. I take this opportunity to dart back inside my house as my friend watches, making sure to close the patio door. A few hours later, one of my roommates comes home very drunk, and as we figured later, they failed to make sure the patio door shut all the way. Morning time comes, and I wake up in an empty apartment. I open my phone, and have a singular message from my roommate, 3 hours ago, stating that when they left for work this morning, there was a person they didn't know sleeping inside the patio area. They thought it was a drunk person who lived in the neighborhood, and entered the wrong house by mistake, and evidently did not find it enough of a reason to call me or wake me up. I immediately go to the entry of our apartment, pulling the door open fast. To my surprise, the person who had been talking to us in the car the night before is laying casually across my staircase, fiddling with something. I scream, "Hey," loudly, and they immediately hop up and run out my patio door. I run down the stairs after them and open the door. They are standing across the street, just smiling at me and giggling. They then give me a little wave and run off. I close the door hard and go back up the steps to see what items they had left. Sitting on the steps was a few coins, some weird wire-type objects, I think bobby pin after you bent it into a straight line, a lighter, and a pocket knife. Never saw them again. Unrelated to my stories, but shortly after I moved from that area, 1. A teenage girl was abducted from that same corner where I saw the van. 2. After a car chase, police found a severed head in a freezer of a house along my block as well. Can link the article on this one. I also got a lot of questions regarding calling 911 on my last post, and wanted to clarify. I am from a rural area and have had many bad experiences with cops abusing power, and have been raised to always be wary of police. I also had situations that were severe enough that I did need to call them, and they didn't help me. So, that is not really the thought that goes through my head when dealing with these situations, and have learned how to take care of myself or utilize community resources for other situations. These all happened years ago, and it's pretty wild to look back on, and remember how terrified I felt in these times. There's my stories. I hope you all enjoyed. When I was 7 or 8, my family went to the beach and rented a room. We had all kinds of rooms where we rent out our booth, and they connect through a door. Like there's doors to leave the room and doors to the other room. In the room connected to ours, there was this army family, military dad, some kids and a wife. My older sister was supposed to be watching me, as we were down at the jacuzzi during the evening. As we're playing and hanging out and just having a good time, I didn't get out much, was naive, and all around a little kid. We're both white-skinned, blue eyes, and blonde hair. This mom literally sits in the jacuzzi with us. She starts talking to us, and is just making herself real comfortable. I was very naive as a kid. Eventually, we started talking books, and she's talking about her kids, who are never even seen. And we're just having a good conversation, really in depth, I felt like. My sister decides she wants to go back to the room, but I don't. I wanted to stay and talk to the mom. So my sister goes back to the room, and now it's just 7-year-old me and some 40-year-old woman. It should have set off some creepy alarms, but did not. So she starts talking about going and walking on the beach. It's like 10 p.m. She wants to go walk on the beach and get shells. I thought it was a great idea. I'd get to walk on the beach at night. I felt so free and like a big kid. I didn't need my sister or anything. So I run back to the room to tell my grandparents that I'm walking on the beach with Sue, or whatever her name was. I remember my grandmother reading her book, barely listening to what I said. She just shooed me off. It is important to know I didn't live with my parents. So I start walking down the creepy motel corridor. Really was a dark, dim stairwell at a cheap motel on the beach. So I'm going through the stairwell like something out of a movie. Too bad I'd never seen this movie. So I'm walking through this stairwell, the mom's way at the bottom telling me to hurry up, and this and that. While walking through the stairs, Army Dad comes running, hauling ass to where I'm at. He told me,
"Your mom is calling you. It's really important. We gotta go."
And basically grabbed me by the wrist, softly, not aggressively, and led me back to our room. He knocked on the door and explained what had happened. I never thought much of it till about a year ago when it came back to me. This woman was leading me away to the beach alone at night, and this army guy got a terrible feeling in his gut, so he intervened. When he said my mom was looking for me, as I don't live with my mom, it set off alarm bells in my head. That's when I realized something was up, so I didn't resist going back to my family. As a kid, I knew since he was saying my mom wanted me, it was important. I just knew something was up because I don't live with my mom. I'm now 20 years old, and I truly believe that that mom was trying to lure me away to do God knows what. And this army dude had a bad feeling and saved my life. Thinking back, I get such a bad feeling all throughout my body. I know now I wouldn't have made it back from that beach trip. Thank you, army dude. Your gut feeling and having a watchful eye saved something terrible from happening. That woman was creepy, and I never saw her kids. A few years ago, an ex and I decided to take a long-deserved vacation. We had been dating for a couple years, and for one reason or another, hadn't ever managed to take any serious vacations together. This particular year, I had an overabundance of vacation time saved up, since we had never went anywhere for more than a day or so at a time, and time was running out for me to use it or lose it, so we decided to take somewhat a last-minute trip. Of course, neither of us had passports, since it was so last-minute, so we were looking at Florida, California, Hawaii, figured that was too far. when I stumbled upon the fact that Puerto Rico doesn't require passports for U.S. citizens. Even better. It turned out my girlfriend knew someone who had a vacation rental home a couple blocks from the beach, so it was on. We got to Puerto Rico. San Juan was beautiful. We got our rental car and headed for our rental home. We opted for the faster, less scenic route in hopes of getting some beach time once we got the keys and got settled in. Not knowing anything about PR, I will say it was a bit of a shock. Everything was pretty run down, McDonald's and BK everywhere. Most streets didn't have signs. Neither of us spoke much more Spanish than "Dos cervezas, por favor." But the pictures of the rental property looked nice enough, so I wasn't that worried. It took about 30 to 40 minutes for each of us to reach our destination, and upon pulling off the highway onto the neighborhood roads, we were immediately greeted with the multitude of burned out, run down, abandoned homes. I was starting to feel like we made a big mistake, and it only seemed to get worse. We got the house, which happened to be on the nicer streets. Only a few abandoned rundown homes on this one, and it seemed okay. The windows had bars on them, all the houses in the area did. The driveway had a gate, which we were told to make sure we lock at the night, and any time we were in the house. Part of the house was being renovated, so we got the studio, and it was really more of a one-bedroom, and it was $200 for the week, since we knew the owner. So I couldn't complain too much. The man who showed us around didn't speak much English, but he was very sweet. Unfortunately, he said the AC was broken and he didn't think it would be fixed before we left. Needless to say, it wasn't a great start to our first vacation together, but we were determined to make the most of it. We spent the next day or so exploring the immediate area, took a long walk on the beach, hit up the local surf bar, watched some of the locals surfing, found a grocery store, tried to avoid the Walmart, etc. All in all, it wasn't that bad. The surf bar had live music on the weekends, NFL on Sunday, and had just a short walk. There was even a decent little skate spot around the corner, though I had neglected to bring my board. I think it was the third night when we got there. We had gotten home late after checking out the rainforest. We cooked some dinner at the house, sat out on the patio, and just took it easy. Around 10 or 11, my girlfriend was checking email or something, and I decided to take a walk down the beach since it was a full moon. I grabbed a Modelo Light, one of those few beers available in PR, and headed out. As I mentioned, it was only a couple blocks, and it seemed safe enough the past few nights. I did, however, lock the gate on the way out. About half a block from the house, I see someone on the other side of the street, looking through a car. I didn't think much of it. Since he had the door open, I assumed it was his car. Nothing suspicious, and kept walking. I was maybe a half block past him when I glanced back and noticed that he was standing next to the car, curbside, and he seemed to be staring at me. He was wearing a white shirt, so even though he was in the shadows, I could still see him. It seemed a bit creepy, but I figured he probably lived there and just didn't recognize me and was seeing what I was up to. I kept walking and made my way down to the beach about another block and a half away. There was a small patch of some odd grass just before some rocks, then the beach. I stopped on the grass. I wasn't wearing shoes and it felt nice on my feet, and stood under the palm trees for a moment, sipping my beer, just kind of looking around, taking it all in. That's when I happened to glance back the way I came, and noticed the man in a white shirt standing near the end of the street. I stood there for a moment, trying not to let him know that I had seen him, or that I was feeling uneasy at his presence in any way. And he stood there as well. I was sure it must be the same guy, as I hadn't seen anyone else on the street on my walk down. I continued to sip my beer, and he continued standing at the corner. He was standing completely out in the open, but it just seemed odd that he was just standing there. I didn't really want to look directly at him, so I couldn't tell what he was doing. At this point, I was becoming fairly uneasy. I've never been worried about walking around at night, but I had never been in a place quite like this either. The road that ran along the beach had a few streetlights. The nearest one was just up the beach a bit, so I decided to make my way towards it in hopes that whatever this guy was up to, it had nothing to do with me. I walked back to the sidewalk, as I figured it was better to stay where it was, somewhat lit, and made my way over to the streetlight, all while trying not to let on that I'm aware of this guy's presence and getting a bit freaked out. I got to the streetlight and stopped. I took out my cell phone to try and seem as casual as I could and glanced around and didn't see him anymore. I breathed a sigh of relief and figured I had just been freaking myself out for no reason, and decided to call my girlfriend to tell her what had happened and that I was on my way back. I called her and started walking back towards our street, telling her about this guy creeping on me, and then I see him. At the end of the street, there was an abandoned house. It had no roof, doors, or windows, just walls, and I could clearly see someone in a white shirt standing in the doorway. I stopped in my tracks. "Oh shit, he's still here," I said. He was far enough away that he couldn't hear me, but when I stopped, I saw him take a step back into the dark house, so I could no longer see him. At this point, my girlfriend was getting freaked out as well, so I turned around and started heading back towards the streetlight. There was another street up just a bit, and I figured I could take that and loop back around to the house. I tried to walk as normally as possible as to not let on that I was scared. I even paused for a moment near the streetlight and feigned a look at the ocean, at which point I could see that he had come out of the house and appeared to be walking towards me. My heart racing, I continued towards the next street. When I got to the corner, I turned left. Looking over my shoulder, I could see that this guy was definitely coming down the sidewalk towards me. He didn't appear to be running, but he must have been walking fairly quickly because he had definitely gained some ground on me. I turned the corner, and once I was behind a house and safe out of sight, I told my girlfriend that I was hanging up and going to run. I ran pretty much as fast as I could and didn't look back. Of course, one of the houses on the street just happened to have some large dogs, which began to bark wildly as I ran by, which just about scared the shit out of me. I made it back to the house, unlocked the gate, and quickly locked it behind me. I looked around to see if anyone had seen me, but there was no one in sight. My girlfriend was pretty freaked out, so we locked the doors and shut the blinds and called it a night. I didn't have any more run-ins with any late-night creepers the rest of the time we were there, and all in all, we ended up having a great vacation. It still gives me a little chill recounting this story, though.
This all happened in July of 2024. I was 12 at the time, and my parents brought me to Kona, Hawaii, the Big Island. Needless to say, that was an amazing time and is just about the last place you'd expect something creepy to happen. That is, until the second to last night there. My parents and I were tossing around a ball in the ocean when I overthrow my dad and a kid my age catches it. We invite him to join in, and after a while, my parents get tired and go back on the beach, while me and him, his name is Jason, stay in playing. A woman that appears to be his mother is walking around taking pictures of us over and over, and when my mom tries to start a conversation with her, the woman completely ignores her. Turns out, Jason lives in Los Angeles and is heading back tomorrow, just as we are. We were connecting through LAX, and thank God we didn't share a flight. Once it gets dark, we go back on the beach and don't see Jason's mother anywhere. He confirmed it was her. After searching all over the beach, we head back to the hotel. To clarify, the hotel is directly behind the beach with a pool and bar in between. You can vaguely see the beach through palm trees depending on the floor, but certainly not your child. We take Jason up to his room to see if his mother is there, and he says hello to a man on the way up as if he knows him. My mom asks if the man is his dad, and he says no, as his father ran off 5 months after he was born. We knock on the hotel door several times and we can hear the TV on, but no one answers. We're all hungry, so we go down to the lobby to use the phone. He calls up to his room and leaves a message that we're going to the downstairs restaurant to eat. So we have buffalo wings and soda and talk about SpongeBob, Ed, Edd and Eddy, etc. He seemed like any other kid. It was a bit strange, though, when we were in the ocean and lost one of our floats. He went swimming after it way too far, and my dad called him to come back. Otherwise, who knows how far he'd have chased it and possibly drowned. Now, it's been at least 3 hours since we saw any sign of his mother, until we head back to the lobby. She's there by the concierge, screaming at us like she called the police. Knowing how crazy this was, my dad called them as well. They arrive rather quickly and we tell our story, all the while Jason's mother is shouting,
"You're just trash!"
at us repeatedly. I don't recall Jason saying much of anything. Eventually, the situation dies down and we go back to our rooms, placing a desk in front of the door. Fortunately, we don't run into them on the way back. So, I hope Jason is doing okay at this point, and Jason's mom, let's not meet.
Growing up, my aunt and uncle owned a beach condo. My favorite way to spend the summer was to stay there with my family, specifically my cousin Charlie. We were absolutely inseparable growing up. There was a 1-year difference between us. The beach we stayed at was a very popular tourist beach on the South Carolina coast. So in the summer, it was incredibly busy. I mean, barely any room between you and the family next to you. Now, my family would spend all day on the beach, from about 10 a.m. to 7 p.m. The beach would stay crowded until about 5 p.m., and everyone would go back to their rooms to shower and go out to eat. So from around 5 to 7 every day was my favorite time to be outside. We would actually have room to run wild, build sandcastles, dig huge holes, and not have to worry about people knocking them down or being too close. Around 5:30 p.m. one day, my family decided they wanted to walk the pier, about 2 miles away, and me and Charlie begged to stay so we could build sandcastles. We were 9 and 10 at the time, and they said we could stay as long as we didn't get in the water or leave our beach spot. The condo we stayed at was 1 row back, and we were not allowed to cross the street without adults. We agreed to our terms and continued to build a row of sandcastles as they walked away. Around 5 minutes later, an extremely tall man wearing a floppy beach hat, sunglasses, with a dollop of sunscreen on his nose, came straight up to us. He started commenting about how pretty our sandcastles were, asking us how long it took us to build them that high, if it was just the 2 of us working on them, which I clearly see what he was getting at with these questions now. We were both extremely introverted kids. We thanked him, kept our answers short, and tried to ignore him as he still stood there asking us questions. All of a sudden he got really quiet, started looking around at mostly the empty beach, and said he had to go meet his friend. He told us to stay right there so he could bring his friend back to look at how great our sandcastles were, and walked away from us. Well, when he got away at a safe distance, me and Charlie both looked at each other and said,
"We've got to get out of here."
Side note, hell yeah at us for being smart kids. We immediately started weighing our options. We knew our family wouldn't be back for at least another 30 minutes. We also knew we weren't allowed to cross the street, and quite frankly, we were scared to. About 100 yards away was a tiny ramp overlooking the ocean. I believe it was just handicap access to the beach, as well as just a place to sit. We got our big shovels and decided to hollow out under the ramp pier thing, enough to where we could crawl under and not be seen. It didn't take us long since the high tide over the years had taken out a good 3 feet of sand underneath, and our adrenaline was rushing mad fast. We took our shovels inside and crawled under. The man still yet to be seen. I assume it took us all of 8 minutes to climb under the pier. Our heads were partially visible above the sand horizon, and we started freaking out thinking he would be able to spot us if he looked hard enough. There were 2 boogie boards lying about 50 yards away that looked like kids had abandoned on a beach. We grabbed them and propped them up against the ramp, covering our crawl space and the top of our heads from sight. Charlie curled up in a ball and cried while running scenarios by me that
"We were definitely going to get taken."
Tried to calm him down and say everything was going to be okay, but our parents would be back soon. But I definitely felt like crying myself. The whole thing felt so weird. I feel that since we both had such a bad feeling about the situation, especially at a young age, this man was with sinister intentions. Charles and I peeked out of the small slits where the boogie boards curved and eventually saw the man walking back. He didn't have anyone with him, which we definitely thought he would since he said he was bringing back a friend. He saw we were gone, turned around several times, checking to see if we were in the ocean or by the dunes. Once he realized, and thankfully didn't notice us there, we were gone and he got extremely angry, noticeably angry, He started huffing and puffing, stomping around. Then he looked at our sandcastles and kicked all of them down. We built a ton over the course of the day, and basically had a long wall of them. And he kicked every single mound down and stormed away. We stayed under the ramp/pier thing for 45 more minutes until our family finally got back. We were way too scared to get out, especially after seeing his irrational reaction. We cried and told our family what had happened, and they didn't believe us. We still talk about it sometimes at family gatherings or holidays. Both of us still remember it like it was yesterday. Seriously, I'm so glad we were aware kids who thought quickly. So creepy-ass beach man who kicked down our sandcastles, let's not meet. If you have any stories that you would like to see narrated here on the channel, please go into the subreddit and submit them there. The link is in the description. Also, we do have a Discord now. Thank you so much to Creepy Clown Girl for putting it together for us. You can come hang out with me and other narrators and get the party started, get spooky with us. That link is also in the description as well. And last but certainly not least, I wanted to introduce the King of Panic. We have a lot of brand new content coming soon with him in it. He is very talented. He does not have his own channel. He just kind of wants to be a part of this. So if you would like to hear from him once you start and you like his voice, stay tuned here. And as always, thank you for visiting the Panic Room. You have successfully made it to the next portion of your tour. Please stay tuned for your next prompt. Click the like button and subscribe to receive notifications for when the next portion of your tour is ready to join. Thank you for watching. Don't let the panic drown you.